and welcome to our third video on the social emotional learning skills in mathematics. To begin with, we're just going to look at the new addition to the elementary curriculum that has been added by the ministry. And note that it is saying we are not to be assessing, evaluating, or reporting on the overall expectations related to social emotional learning skills. But we are expected that instruction of the social emotional learning skills will continue while educators engage in ongoing professional learning. So the reason behind this is historically, social emotional learning skills has often been about compliance and control, specifically with Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So we are to address it and support students with monitoring and reflecting on their own skills while we engage in more professional learning about diverse, equitable, and belonging practices. So our focus for today is on A3, which is maintain positive motivation and perseverance. And as always, you will find that SEL focus in the long range plans on the topic page under the cluster of expectations. So, what exactly does it mean to maintain positive motivation and perseverance? It means that students will recognize that testing out different approaches to problems and learning from mistakes is an important part of the learning process and is aided by a sense of optimism and hope. And we provided you here with some exit ticket prompts to help support this skill that you can use with your students. And of course, we're going to revisit the learning pit as we have students monitor and reflect on this particular social emotional learning skill. So we really want students to understand that learning doesn't occur without a sense of struggle. And that if they're not struggling or making mistakes, there's a good chance they're not learning any new material on this day. So, as we provide students with an opportunity to practice perseverance, we want to be creating learning opportunities for them that involve the mathematical processes. And if you are thinking about an activity that you're going to do in class and you cannot connect it to one of these mathematical processes, then the activity is likely not worth the time that is going to take students to do. So we're giving students learning opportunities with the mathematical processes so they can practice and reflect on their perseverance and their positive motivation. So we are going to talk a little bit today about struggle and the idea that we do want students to be struggling because that is when the learning occurs. And when you support the struggle as opposed to steal the struggle, meaning you would come in and save the day and help them show them how to get the answer as opposed to guiding them with questions, you're going to take them much farther than ever before. And it is a fine balance between students engaging in what is referred to as productive struggle and knowing your students well enough to be able to recognize when unproductive struggle may be occurring. So we're just going to take a moment now to look at what that means. So productive struggle is leading to an understanding. It's making those learning goals feel attainable and the effort's worthwhile because they're feeling like they're progressing. It brings results. It leads students to feelings of empowerment and efficacy, and it creates a sense of hope. But on the other side, if we leave them in that learning pit for too long without potentially throwing them some sort of an aid, it could lead to frustration. It could make those learning goals feel like they're out of reach, and then they're going to create some negative talk about themselves. It feels fruitless. It leaves students feeling abandoned on their own, and it creates a sense of inadequacy. So, this is a fine dance that you, as the educator, play. And you need to know your students very well and be able to recognize the signs for when the struggle is moving into an unproductive stage. And we're going to examine that a little bit with an idea that Dr. Peter Liljedahl talks about quite often about this idea of flow. And when students are in the learning pit in a positive, productive struggle way, then they're engaged with what is referred to as flow. And this is a dynamic process. So they'll be moving in and out of flow throughout a task or an activity. These are the factors that are going to impact flow. So, the first six that you see here are internal in the student. But if we've created the culture and continue to create the culture with our positive math talk and our positive growth mindset, then students should feel in a space where they're okay with failing, that they're going to learn from these mistakes, um, that they're not feeling as self-conscious in the math classroom as maybe they have in the past, and that the activity becomes an end in itself. So we are hoping that the classroom culture has been created so that students are comfortable with these feelings of uncomfortableness. The last three factors that impact flow are more what we can do during the activity to help students stay in that perseverance, stay in that flow area. And that is that there are clear goals every step of the way. There is immediate feedback to one's actions, and there's a balance between challenges and skills. So let's look at these a little closer. Um, when there are moments of imbalance, in which case the students may be moving into some unproductive flow, the balance between challenge and ability is central to maintaining that flow. And it comes into sharp focus when we consider the consequences of having this imbalance in the system. So, for example, if the challenge of the activity far exceeds a person's ability, they are likely to experience a feeling of anxiety or frustration. And on the other hand, if their ability far exceeds the challenge offered by the activity, they are apt to become bored. And when there is a balance in the system, then we have a state of flow that has been created. And they will oftentimes bounce in and out of the flow in either the boredom area or the anxiety area, or sometimes both. So, what is our role as teachers then? As we see students moving, as we want to move students, we're sensing some students are in this anxiety or frustration phase. So they're becoming in an unproductive struggle state. What are some things that we can do to bring them back into flow? Well, we can have some hints in our back pocket to give them. We can ourselves join the group for a little bit. We can pair them up with a stronger group. We could give them an easier task. Or we could answer some of the task for them to get them moving. If they're really stuck on where to start, we can maybe say, let's start here. And again, we can give a hint. On the opposite end, how do we get students from this boredom state back into flow? Well, the same way that we have hints in our back pocket, we have some extensions in our back pocket. We can introduce doubt. So just when students are asking you, is this correct? If you just kind of give them a funny look like, and then walk away, you've just introduced doubt. They're going to go back and redo the question because they're thinking that they didn't get the right answer. You could pair them up with another group that maybe got a different answer than them. So now they're going to have a little bit of a debate on what's going on. You could remove a member of the group, or you can pair them up with another group. So, what we are lucky about is there are some buffer zones in this flow graph that before students actually enter into a place of frustration, they will persevere for a certain amount of time. And this will be a different amount of time for all your students, which again is why you will know your students best. Same as before they jump into the boredom part of this graph, there is a space in there um, of tolerance. And what we want to start to move with this social emotional learning skill that we're looking at today is we want to start looking at getting students to recognize when they are in the different zones and begin to use some self-regulation strategies to either increase their ability or decrease the challenge. Because as we know, um, you might not be able to get to the group because you're busy with another group. So we want students to start to do this movement on their own. And how can we do that? So, how can we support that self regulation? So, a great thing to do is always have manipulatives readily available for students to select that tool and make that a norm in your classroom. That these are thinking tools that we can use. Encourage students to seek assistance from others. And that is involved in building up your culture because, of course, we don't want students going and distracting other groups. But if we can lay down the norms of what it means to go gain some assistance from another group, guide the students with questions such as, what is the problem asking? What do you already know? What do you need to know? Can you draw a picture or create a model? Can you try a simpler problem? Is your conclusion reasonable? And sometimes it's helpful for you to have those on an anchor chart somewhere posted in the room so students can refer to them as well if you're busy with a different group. Uh, as we've been using in the past few years in elementary schools, the vertical non-permanent surfaces are a great way because it has opened up the walls of your classroom and students can step out of their own problem solving and look around the room to get some hints from other groups on how other groups are starting some problems. And then, of course, having some sentence frames or prompts posted to encourage discussion when students are stuck. So, have you tried thinking about the problem like blank? I don't understand why you did this. Can you clarify what you meant by this? I agree with you when you said, or I am confused by blank because blank. So, those are some things to consider as we move further along in our social emotional learning journey. And stay tuned for the next edition of the next video for social emotional learning.